Very warm welcome to the launch of the Harvey Nash Group Digital Leadership Report. It's wonderful to see so many of you here. Over 800 people have registered. In fact, we have 100 plus people in the Harvey Nash studios today joining us as well. And we're in over 30 countries represented here at this event. So welcome to all of you. No one needs to be told just how important speed and agility is. But speed alone will not get us to where we need to get to our destination. And as digital leaders know, and you will hear from them this afternoon, to look beyond the pandemic, we're now realizing that the destination and direction of travel have changed. New products, new services, new ways to engage with customers, staff, and suppliers have all become top priorities. And for many organizations, it's fundamentally changing the way that they view technology and who owns it. So, welcome to the Harvey Nash Digital Leadership Report, brought to you in collaboration with CIONet. Now, in its 23rd year and building on our heritage with the CIO survey, this report brings you the widest ranging insights into the world of digital leadership and everything that comes with it. So what will we be covering in the next 60 minutes? Well, we're going to begin with a brief video, and this will share our key findings from this year's report. We'll then move into an international panel discussion hosted by Harvey Nash Group's technology evangelist, Dave Savage. I'll let Dave introduce the panel properly, but I wanted to say that we have a wonderful mix of expertise and perspective from them. I'm sure you'll be excited to hear from them soon. Comes from innovation and inclusion, from Formula One to frontline medicine. We have a panel that represents pretty much every viewpoint you can possibly have in technology. So thank you, panel, for joining us today. And finally, we're going to conclude with a Q&A session. We don't want a passive audience. Your views, after all, created this survey. So we want your input today, and Dave will explain how you can take part in more detail later. Okay, that's it from me. I hope you enjoy the rest of the event and find it useful in your business and career planning. Now let's hear the findings from this year's report.
Welcome everyone to the 2021 launch of the Harvey Nash Group Digital Leadership Report in collaboration with CIONet and MIT CISA. Now in our 23rd year, keen followers of our annual survey will notice a name change from CIO Survey to Digital Leadership Report. Technology is changing, and so are the people who lead it. So this new name reflects how embedded technology now is across the entire organisation. And on the subject of digital leaders, thank you so much to every one of you who took part. We know it's quite a detailed survey that takes some time to complete, but the feedback we get from you is that you value the depth and the insight that it gives. Now, last year we reported in the middle of a global pandemic, but if anyone thought a year later things would have calmed down, well, they would be wrong, wouldn't they, Luke?
If last year was all about dealing with the unexpected, this year has been about building a path back to a more stable but very different world. And digital leaders are not short of challenges to overcome. Through this research, we've asked deep questions about how organizations are responding and how digital leaders are evolving. Here we've picked the 8 key insights.
Last year, we reported the biggest surge in technology spend that we have ever recorded. Like the pandemic itself, this surge was unexpected and unplanned for. And at the time, digital leaders were expecting their future expenditure to be cut back to compensate. But actually, as we come out of the pandemic, this reining back of investment has proven to be short-lived. As we enter 2022, digital leaders are actually reporting the highest ever levels of optimism for increasing budgets and headcount in the coming year. And we feel it. Skills shortages are now at the highest they have been for over a decade.
But whereas last year's investment was tactical in nature, the current investment is being made with an eye to the future. And in particular, on making big changes to how organizations engage with customers. Over half the organizations are expecting major change within the next 3 years. It's difficult to overestimate the impact of this. For the majority of businesses, it has become an immediate priority to find new ways of generating revenue and engaging with customers.
If the focus for boards is on business transformation, the big question that remains for digital leaders is how. For many organisations, the pandemic has been a useful catalyst to drive forward their digital strategy, both technical and culturally. A huge investment was made in moving systems to the cloud, making them more available, more scalable and agile. Many found themselves working in new ways, able to pivot and change much more quickly than they expected. And this appetite for change has stuck. In fact, we've seen a big leap in organisations rating themselves highly in their digital strategy, with this figure almost doubling in 4 years. At the heart of these digitally strong organisations are agility and closeness to the customer. They are almost 3 times as successful at pivoting and scaling their customer channels as their peers. But Luke, also at their heart is data.
Yes, it's often been said that data is the new gold. The analogy is particularly relevant. Data insights are not only precious, but they're also proving rare to find and difficult and expensive to attract. As one digital leader said to us in our research, "Don't talk to me about big data. I've got enough small data problems to sort out first." Despite data long being high on the agenda of many organizations, for most, the extent of their investment is in small projects and pilots. It's only those digitally strong organizations that are seeing returns. They're almost twice as likely as their peers to use it to shape their new products and drive new revenue.
Overall, organisations expect around half of their staff's days to be worked from home from now on. Home working appears to have had some very positive effects on productivity and work-life balance, but it's also had a major negative effect on mental wellness, collaboration and, perhaps surprisingly, inclusion. Parallel to this, 8 in 10 of our respondents say the pandemic has made their staff reconsider their life priorities and made the job of retention harder to some extent. Many of the leaders we speak with, both in technology and HR, are still trying to work out how to make this all work. Some feel it's not sustainable. Remarkably though, only a third of digital leaders have redesigned their employee offering to reflect the new hybrid model of work. And this is significant given the slow but relentless rise in skills shortages.
Sustainability is becoming increasingly important to boards. At least 1/5 of the world's 2,000 largest companies have launched net zero strategies. And no doubt others will follow. Increasingly, suppliers are being asked to provide their sustainability credentials when responding to tenders. And those with a clear strategy will have an advantage.
Amongst all this talk of transformation and being close to the customer, one area remains even higher in the minds of boards and digital leaders: cybersecurity. Digital leaders know that no amount of bright ideas or exciting innovations are going to attract the board's attention if their organisation is in the middle of a major cyber attack. The good news is that whilst minor breaches seem to be growing, major attacks seem to be levelling out. The challenge with cybercrime is that, unlike other areas in tech, like cloud adoption, the project never truly becomes business as usual. The bar is always being raised, and cybercriminals increasingly well organised. There are even companies now manufacturing viruses for sale and others selling access to corporate networks. It's becoming a mature sector in its own right and even more scary for that fact.
So into this all steps the digital leader. Digital has never been more important to the board. But as the focus of technology moves from running the business to transforming it, the focus on the digital leader is also changing. Traditionally, the CIO has been turned to, but in the increasingly important areas of customer engagement and transformation, the CIO's role is less clear. In fact, other executives may play a more significant role. In reality, job titles are less important. The real question the board is asking is, who can get us close to the customer? Who can make us agile? And who can bring real insights from our data? Maybe that's the CIO. Maybe that's someone else. But either way, the CIO has an incredibly important role to play, either in leading it or in supporting making it happen. One thing is for sure. Whatever role you're in as a digital leader, it's never been a more exciting time to be one.
So, as Luke and Lily have pointed out, there are 8 areas within the survey. There's lots of information to get through, and we've got 45 minutes to do it. Bev mentioned we've got an international panel. We've got 3 people in our studio. We've got 3 people in the now obligatory COVID video wall. We'll get to those people in a moment. First of all, though, we're joined by Barbara Gottardi. Barbara, you are the CIO for Vanguard Asset Management. Just watching back through those results, what stands out to you?
Finally, technology is seen as an enabler to help companies to succeed. And I think the role of a CIO is becoming a bit different and part of the leadership team. And I think that's a good way forward.
This is where we're kind of going to ask each of you the same question. You're going to have to think of something original.
Yeah.
So we've got Dr. Hannah Allen from Tinto. Very quickly, again, same thing. We've just seen those results. What stands out?
Yeah, I think coming from a startup ecosystem and from a women's health perspective, which is my background, my passion, I can't not say that it's been the impact on women has been demonstrated here throughout the pandemic. And, how are we going to deal with that in the future? How are we going to put guardrails into place and support women in the workforce and in employment moving forward, I think.
And lastly, in the studio, Dr. Rashada Harry, Chief Technologist at Amazon Web Services, but also founder of Your Future, Your Ambition. Again, what jumps out to you when watching back those results?
I think there was a lot of good findings there. One of the things that really stood out for me was the role of data and the insight it can provide to organisations to help them get close to their customers. But equally, the role not only of the CIO, but multiple people at the C-suite and across the organisation that can help get closer to the customers, understand what's required, and move forward to a greater direction. So that was it for me.
Now, we did say we've got the now obligatory COVID video wall. We'll start by going to the United States and saying good morning to Marcus East, the CDO from T-Mobile North America. Very fetching background there, Marcus.
Thank you, David, and good to see you. Good afternoon.
Again, looking back at those results, anything in particular jumping out to you?
Yeah, 3 things really stand out for me, David. One of them is this focus on agility. It still surprises me, having worked for companies like Apple and Google, that companies are still talking about becoming agile. So that's something that really stands out to me. That's clearly important. The customer focus is great to see. I know one of the challenges for technologists historically is that we haven't always been seen as people that are advocating for and delivering for customers. And then in some respects, the most exciting thing for me is this really reimagining of the employee value proposition, thinking about how can we embrace a hybrid world and make sure that we deliver the kind of work mode that works for our employees. So a lot of exciting insights there in the report this year.
I'm certain that hybrid working is something that we'll get onto in more detail. If we jump over to Geneva, we've got Nigel Richardson. You are the European CIO for PepsiCo. Again, good afternoon. Thanks for joining us from Europe.
Afternoon, David.
Again, similarly, anything in particular that you found interesting?
One thing I was interested in, given the scale of the opportunity with digital transformation, and particularly with artificial and machine learning, which I think is going to have a huge impact over the next decade and more, is that only 6% of organizations have currently got large-scale implementations, which in a way just reinforces what a huge opportunity that is over the next several years.
And then lastly, we're a bit closer to home. Unfortunately, Graeme, you were due to join us in the studio this afternoon because you are just in Oxfordshire, but unfortunately a member of your family has tested positive for COVID, which I think explains why we're still doing this in a studio environment rather than a larger environment. But you are the CIO of Williams Racing. How are you?
Hi, David. Good afternoon, everyone. Sorry I can't be with you in the studio.
And look, finally, I know I'm asking you last, but 8 points. 6th person, what jumped out?
Yeah, there were 8.6 people, but Marcus took 3, so that really doesn't seem fair. I'll go with the last point that was made, because I think that still impresses itself upon me, and I think it's really true. There has never been a more exciting time to be a digital leader.
Perfect. Look, we do want this to be as interactive as possible. We're thinking, I'm not entirely sure because I haven't got the stats in front of me, but nearly 900 people were signed up. So a few of you should be watching. Whilst I have some pre-prepared questions, one of my colleagues, Hannah, is off camera feeding me the questions that people are asking. I don't want to leave it to the end. It'd be far more interesting if you got involved as the topics came up. So do put your questions through on the Zoom link or on LinkedIn, in fact. And I will be looking at my phone. Hannah will be sending me the best questions, and we'll make sure that we incorporate them into the debate. However, first question, Barbara, if we come to you, whilst more than half of the organisations surveyed have major plans for transformation, what steps do you need to feel that they should take to make sure that they aren't wasting that investment?
So we've talked a lot about agility and new ways of working, transformation. But one thing that in many organizations still hasn't changed is the way we do budget. So we really focus on cross-functional team, restructuring the organization, and we're still trying to use the budget from January to December and by project. So if we really want to make it worthwhile, I think we've got to shift the mentality to a real capacity model and understand that, you know, every person sitting at their desk or at home at the moment, we pay for them regardless if they're doing work or not. So we need to make sure they're fully utilized. So I think we need to start thinking budget in a slightly different perspective. So technology is a cost, and we need to see it as an investment. We need to make sure we use it as best as possible. So I think we need to focus much more on a outcome-focused mentality and, you know, having a capacity-based model so you know what your team size is and how much you spend and kind of work more dynamically and in conjunction with the business and what the customer really wants, and realizing that you don't really know what you want next year. So work step by step and be flexible on that.
Do feel free to jump in on points where it feels appropriate. I've also got you guys in my ear. Marcus, I'd quickly turn to you. If we're going to be successful in driving change, what efforts do you think are being made to get to grips with our own staff first? Obviously, there will still be some business resistance as we're going through this transformative era.
Absolutely, David. Yeah, I think one of the things we haven't talked about enough over the years as tech and digital leaders is our leadership skills and our ability to really motivate and get a team engaged and empowered to actually deliver the things that an organization needs. And as I think about my role today, and I think about other roles that I've seen in other organizations that are similar, there's an increasing emphasis on really being able to set a clear vision, identify the metrics that matter, and then really motivating the team to be able to get after it. And I think that perhaps 20 years ago when I was starting out, a lot of people were over-indexed on the technical skills and the ability to actually manage systems. Now I think we need to over-index on the ability to really motivate and build teams that are going to be high-performance teams, but are going to deliver for the business. I think that's a real important area for technologists to focus on.
You say there about investing in teams. We've got a question that's come in from Clovis, asking what leaders can do to ease the induction and onboarding of newcomers in hybrid setups when it comes to working from home in the office. Barbara, you've hired people through this period. Just quickly, whilst we've got that one, what do you think you can do to ease induction? Because I think onboarding has been a bit of a challenge, right?
It has been a bit of a challenge, and I think again, there's no one fit all. So I'd say you have a model. Assigning a buddy, I think for us works really well. So use an existing person that's quite established, understand the organization, and use that as a companion. And then what we've done is a continuous feedback. So people that were coming on board, ensure they could feedback what worked and what didn't work, and we quickly adapt to that. And then have a simple kind of guide available online, which is not usually, I think when you started that you used to get given a pack and paper that doesn't exist anymore. So have a wiki, a Confluence, a page with the key things, and get people that have just started to head there so they know where to find important things.
Rashada, obviously Amazon Web Services are a huge organisation.
Yes.
That buddying system must be something that's quite useful when you've got such a disparate team in so many different locations.
No, absolutely. And I think just the use of technology to enable people to connect where they wouldn't ordinarily get the opportunity to, you know, joining an organisation in the middle of a pandemic is a difficult and challenging process to go through, let alone a very big organisation. So what we try to do is not only do the buddying system, but we also have community affinity groups as well. Like we have Women at Amazon, we have Glamazon, and these are community groups that really encourage people to join, have candid coffee conversations, get to know your team, have that really shared experience and connect with each other. I think that is invaluable when joining a large organisation where you don't get to sit with your team day to day and experience the nuances that happen at kind of water cooler conversations.
Totally. I was just going to say that it's often the formal stuff that feels like it's easier to implement, and it's the softer, more human side that's actually really, really missing from this. And I love the fact that you have those kind of coffee mornings and more informal kind of social things that, you know, you go and get a coffee and have a chat over the coffee machine. You know, we miss out on that when new people are joining organisations through things, you know, like that we've been experiencing recently. I think the things that from startup land that we have to learn from you guys is kind of how to put more process in place and to make it more formal. We're quite good at the more softer stuff, and there's lots of amazing technology out there to have a remote, you know, coffee with your coworker, and to reenact that kind of cafe experience or over the coffee machine conversation. And I think that's really, really important to kind of harness the more softer side along with the formal processes as well.
Absolutely.
It also helps to foster inclusion and people feeling included as part of their teams. Even with long-standing relationships that you've got within your teams, people can still feel really isolated, especially when they're working from home and in a completely different environment. So having those kind of set times when you can have those authentic conversations, I think are really invaluable. But I think for, you know, someone coming into the organisation from a different background with different experiences, to kind of share that diversity of thought, you need to have that forum where people can be open and to share their experiences. And I think that is what's going to be working well for those who are new entrants into the...
So let's put this in an extreme environment. The report talks about 6 in 10 reporting a decrease in the mental well-being of their teams. We were wondering about how you ensure that the environments promote good mental health. I mean, Graeme, your teams, some of them, they get on the telly every weekend, and if they screw up a pit stop, well, they're publicly humiliated, right?
Not last weekend. We set the fastest time. So, yeah, it's very public, as you say. And also with, you know, the question you just asked about people joining the organization, we were very focused around, on your first day, you get to see Formula One cars and you get to go into the factory and see them being built. And so there was that, you know, that stickiness of, I've joined a team, I'm part of a team. So that's been tricky during the pandemic. So, you know, and I think during the pandemic, a lot of people have rethought their lives. I saw a report that came out of the US recently called The Great Resignation, where a lot of people have realized that this company that I work for doesn't value me and I'm going to go do something else. And the employers who've really focused on their people, one of the things that we talk about at Williams is not referring to our staff and our colleagues and our employees as resources. So we don't talk about how many resources are we going to apply to a project, or how many resources are going to go traveling with the race team and do a pit stop. We talk about people, and you have to think about people in the round, the entire person, because that's the only way that you're going to get the best out of them as a resource, but also you have to understand that they have a life outside of what they do for you. And that's really important to get them operating at their best. And for that, if you have that empathetic relationship with them, when something like the pandemic happens, then I think you still maintain those relationships. It was really difficult for sporting organizations at the start of the pandemic in the lockdown, putting people on furlough, you know, shutting down your operations, not knowing when you were going to go racing again. So a lot of our staff started working on ventilator projects. So people who had been building Formula One cars were now building ventilators. People who had been doing the logistics of moving humans and cars and technology around the world into different racetracks were now focused on moving ventilators around the UK. So our skills are transferable, and people have got a lot of satisfaction out of that, helping the government's challenge to look at ventilators. So I think that's been really important for us. But for a long time, Williams has had to think about, how do we become a destination employer? So most of the Formula One teams are within 1 hour of our site. And so that's really tricky. And, if you're not winning all the time, and we haven't been recently, you can't just put all of your job satisfaction around trackside performance. So we've really focused on, again, the whole individual. How do we make sure that we look after their mental health, how we look after their physical health. We have an occupational health nurse now who works full-time with us, really focused on how do people come to work, feel safe, but also are able to do more than just their job, and that they can do their job safely, but that there's also more to their life than just their job. And then and the last bit around mental well-being and our people, for us was also around diversity and inclusion. And I was talking to a neuroscientist, Dr. Marcia Gottardi, who said to me, think of inclusion first, because I was saying to her that we often hire a diverse workforce, but they don't stay with us long enough. And she said, make sure that you've created an inclusive environment so that diverse people will want to come and work for you. And I thought that was really significant.
Let's stay on that for a moment, and we'll jump around with these questions, which the production team will probably kill me for. But Hannah, if I come to you, the number of women in tech, according to the report, is continuing to gradually rise. I think the word there was gradually, unfortunately. Investment in women has fallen through the pandemic. So if entrepreneurship amongst women is being discouraged, how can organisations try and encourage entrepreneurship and make sure that there are those pathways for women through organisations?
Yeah, great question. I think, firstly, I think it's really important to note that investment in women isn't just falling. And from a startup, and scale-up perspective, when I'm talking to venture capitalists, 2.3% of founding partners are female. So it's phenomenally low. It's like catastrophically low. And less than 2% of VC funding went to female-founded startups throughout the pandemic. And less than 1% went to black female-founded startups. So I have a black female co-founder. And so, we realise that impact, very, very closely. So I think it's one of these things that, we absolutely need to invest in women. We need to not only think about it from a startup perspective, but from my perspective, that's hugely on my agenda. I think we need to get more women into VC. We need to get more women into the startup ecosystem, more women into STEM, full stop, to try and kind of turn this around. So yes, absolutely, we may be increasing, but it's very, very slow. And from my perspective, it's not on enough people's agendas. I think that we kind of accept this as the status quo too much, and we need to kind of challenge that thinking and make sure that we can, really together create much more diversity within startup through SME and through to corporates as well.
I should just say,
David, you mind if I say something there? It was just triggered by what was said. We have a respect committee at Williams, which was a grassroots movement, and I just want to thank Richardson again for coming and being our keynote speaker at the launch of our race workstream recently. But we've looked at all sorts of aspects of human life and the people that we want to hire and bring into our organization, from gender, which I'm in an industry that is really underrepresented from a gender perspective, race, that we've had such brilliant help from Richardson on, looking across age, ability, just a whole load of work streams that we've put in place to make sure that we are creating the right environment to bring the right people into Williams. I just wanted to mention.
I should mention, by the way, Nigel, I know I haven't come to you yet. I will. We're getting a lot of questions coming through about sustainability, and I know that's an area that we're keen to talk about. So we will come to those in a minute. If I stick with inclusion for just a moment, because I do want to turn back to Richardson, and just ask, by concentrating the conversation on gender diversity, are we harming the overall levels of inclusion in technology?
Yeah, and I think that's a really, really good question. So diversity covers multiple streams, as Graeme just mentioned: age, race, religion, gender, and more. And I think, yes, whilst gender is very important, it's not the only area that should be focused on. Actually, diversity is intersectional. I myself am a black female in technology, and actually there's different aspects of challenges that I would face as opposed to another woman in technology. So I don't think it can just be a siloed viewpoint that we take. Having said that, though, I do take the view that diversity across all streams is important at a very young age for people to be able to see and recognise themselves within the technology industry or the STEAM industry, as I now include the arts. I work on the premise that a young person can't be what they can't see. There's a long and lots of commentary on why the needle isn't moving as quickly as perhaps it should be. But actually, I believe that if we started at a younger age and let young people recognise themselves in role models in industry, let them connect with organisations and see that the things that they're studying at school, college, university can be linked to roles that haven't even been thought about yet, that haven't even been innovated for, that can help drive young people into the industry to help get that diversity of perspective, get that diversity across all streams, right? Disability as well, which is another really important one, so that we can have a good 360 view with lots of different perspectives that's going to help move our industry forward. I think without it, we are stifling ourselves.
I mentioned that we're getting some questions around sustainability. Nigel, I will turn to you. I'm actually going to throw an audience question at you that's come from Ian Brooks. Please do keep sending through questions. But sustainability was one of the key trends mentioned, unsurprising with COP26 going on at the moment and the attention that it's getting, as it should. But do CIOs feel they have the skills and knowledge for this? How do we train our teams for net zero and other sustainability areas?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I mean, it's an area that, you know, I'm personally, incredibly passionate about. I grew up in a family, both parents being members of Greenpeace, so I was kind of, if you like, had the kind of environmental sort of sustainability mindset, really ingrained. And to me, it was a bit of a surprise in the report, actually, that it wasn't higher up the agenda. But in terms of technology, now one thing we're doing is we are trying to do exactly that: educate our technology leaders, along with an initiative across our whole business. And really, we've got something we call PepsiCo Positive, which really puts sustainability at the centre. But you're absolutely right. We just found a lot of people just do not know that much about, okay, what practically can you do? So we've put in place a series of education sessions around what can we do from the point of view of emissions, what can we do from the point of view of water scarcity as well. So there are a number of areas to educate ourselves on. The kind of practical things as well that we've done, particularly for our technologies leaders, is where within a business unit we want a leader to manage cross-functionally the initiatives. We've really put forward where we can some of our IT directors and CIOs within the markets, and that's been really, really successful. And it's great to see them playing a leadership role amongst their peers in supply chain and so on.
That's an interesting point that you mentioned there, because we did want to ask you, and I'll stick with you for a second. Sustainability, if it's being fully embraced, do you think it is coming from the top of an organisation or the bottom? I know prior to this event you were talking about the pressure that your daughters place on their expectations of organisations, right?
Mm-hmm. Exactly. I think that's it. I think pressure is just coming from everywhere in the organisation, and so it is happening at a grassroots level in every single organisation. I would pretty much guarantee that. Now, I think to make meaningful change quickly in organisations, certainly large organisations, then it needs to come from the top as well, and it clearly needs to go beyond just statements about what will be done into actually making really specific resource reallocation decisions, because in the end, that's when it makes a real difference, when you're actually going to say, we have a certain amount of resource, we're actually going to now invest a disproportionate amount in sustainability, again, whether it be moving more to clean energy, whether it be, in our case, we do a lot of work with agriculture, just it's such a big part of our business in terms of, if you look at our complete footprint, then agriculture is a big part. But you've got to make, as a senior leadership team, right from the board to the executive team, some specific, resource reallocation decisions that are going to prioritise it. Because I think you'll get the bottom-up demand, and it is a demand. I do think you'll find that companies that don't embrace it are going to have a really tough time attracting talent in the future as well.
I'll stick on our video wall in a minute and come to Graeme, but I will come back because I'm sure that you all are keen to talk about sustainability. But Graeme, fast cars going around circuits in loops, with petrol. I mean, it's a bit of a lightning rod, right, for sustainability. And there we're hearing about resource reallocation. Do you feel that perhaps we're facilitating greenwashing? Is it easier to avoid the hard questions and take real action?
Well, I can't avoid the hard question because you just went there. I hope and I believe that greenwashing will become a thing of the past. I think one of the things, maybe I'm too optimistic, but one of the things that I was really excited about at COP26 was the young activists. And I think they're going to hold governments and organizations and individuals to account, the things that we say that we're going to do. I don't think we just get to keep pushing them out. Now, I know some of the targets that people have talked about are now stretching to 2050, 2070, and so on. But I'm really optimistic that greenwashing won't happen anymore. I don't think people are going to get away with it. Certainly for Williams, for us, our CEO is so passionate about this topic. He's been talking about it even before he joined us earlier this year. He's been talking about how motorsport can make a difference. The petrol that you talked about, is 1% of our carbon footprint. So that's not where we need to, sort ourselves out. So our strategy that our CEO, Jos Capito, has released recently is about Williams going not just carbon net zero by 2030, but being carbon positive. And I love when he explains what he means by that. So actually, Formula One and motorsport in general can do more than just take its own operations to carbon net zero. We can make a contribution into other industries, into the other big challenges that there are in the world. So Williams set up an advanced engineering company back in 2010 that started to look at how to take the knowledge and know-how and technology in Formula One and apply it to some of the most complex challenges there are in the world. And so the battery technology that we developed in Formula One then got moved to other motorsports, which is an easy application, right? So Formula E is using Formula One derived, that's the electric Formula One derived technology. Now, we then took that same technology and we've put it recently into huge mining trucks. These trucks that are working in the mines are going electric. All the way down to, we worked with Brompton on an electric folding bicycle. That same technology that's in a Formula One car is now being used in all of these other areas. Williams developed a flywheel years ago that never got to race in Formula One, but it's used in buses and trams to generate electricity. The things that we use to protect the driver in a Formula One car being used to protect babies. The carbon fiber knowledge that we have and the technology of protecting the driver is being used to protect babies in hospitals in the NHS. So I think there's so much that motorsport can contribute, like we did with the ventilators that I mentioned earlier. Most of the fridges in supermarkets in the UK now are using Williams developed technology to help make the fridges more efficient, and we're saving most of those supermarkets up to 25% of their energy costs by reducing the waste of cold air that comes out into the aisle. So much of the thinking that there is in Formula One, all of these smart people, we're going to apply this to help other industries to reach their targets of being carbon net zero.
Interesting listening to the video wall there. I don't know whether this is necessarily relevant, but out in Lisbon last week at Web Summit, there were a lot of companies who had environmental kind of missions at the heart of what they were doing, but they were on the startup stands. They weren't on the main stage. On the main stage, you had Shell, or you had someone, an organization who could afford to be on the main stage, and that's the way that these events work. Graeme's there talking about, we need to get young activists into the room having that conversation. It's probably the same of startups being at the table. I mean, Hannah, I know it's a slightly different area to what you're doing, but as the leader of a startup, do you find that you're given enough of a voice, enough of a platform to push some of these more mission-driven topics through?
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of going back to what Graeme was saying earlier about your mission, what your company means and how it speaks to other people. So I think our mission is amazing. We enable all women to thrive throughout every life stage, but it means that we connect with people because of that mission. We have we were speaking before, Dave, about people applying to different kind of job roles, and actually, I think when you connect with a mission it gives you that deeper connection to that company, and it makes you want to kind of strive to achieve more, to work kind of better collaboratively together to achieve the main mission of the company. And I think it's also about purpose. So, you know, how do you enable people to feel like they have ownership and autonomy over something? And that, I think, creating that kind of safe haven within a company, whether it's within startups, which just, I think by nature, startups do well because we're small. We all speak to each other. We all see each other. We're a team of 8. It's much easier for us to be innovative and purposeful and, you know, remind ourselves of our amazing mission than it is for somebody or a corporation that has thousands and thousands of employees. But I think it's cultivating that sort of startup ethos is really, really important. So yes, absolutely, I feel like we have a voice on that stage.
Barbara, just to come to you on this, because here we have Hannah, who's got very much that mission-driven kind of startup focus. We were talking about F1 a minute ago, obviously a bit of a lightning rod. They have to kind of be seen to be leading on this front. But an asset management fund, you know, it's possibly slightly less clear. That must be a question when it comes to greenwashing. You know, Nigel said he was surprised that it didn't come further up the list of priorities on the report. Is that perhaps a reflection that a lot of corporate organisations, there are simply more important things, you know, on the in tray of digital leaders right now?
So I think the greenwashing won't wash for much longer. I think Graeme is right. And I think so far it's been tough to be ESG on the agenda, and now it has made it to the agenda, and it's no longer what do we need to say to kind of keep people away. And I do agree with what Graeme was saying as well. I think the employers won't have a choice, because the younger people coming up, and I can see my 2 teenagers as well, are much more aware and focused and keen, and they will check on the mission and make sure that's what they will kind of focus on. So I've seen, you asked top-down or bottom-up, I've seen much more interest and useful informational requests or project ideas coming bottom-up. So I do think we need to open up and listen more and actually let, you know, is the ESG the next innovation thing? So open that up, the forum, and let people come up with the ideas, and I think that will be more successful than what we've done top-down.
And just a last point on sustainability before we move on. Nigel, if I turn back to you. Data, you know, everyone's getting very excited about NFTs. They take up a huge amount of data, and that's not particularly good for the environment. Data and machine learning, though, part of the problem or solution, in your opinion?
My opinion is overall is part of the solution.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's obviously a good question because, I mean, clearly, you know, there is a lot of energy in data centers. Having said that, there's a huge amount of very good work by the big cloud providers to actually, you know, reduce that. And of course, you know, they've made very impressive pledges actually in terms of even, you know, taking all the carbon they've ever produced out the atmosphere with some of their initiatives. But the big point for us is that there are so many areas where we can use machine learning, artificial intelligence to be much, much more precise in the way we do our business. You know, I mentioned agriculture, but there's some great examples there where we're using machine learning to enable, you know, our farmers to both use water and fertilizer much, much more precisely to big environmental benefits. So there are multiple other areas, but agriculture is a big one for us, where we're super clear that, you know, a relatively small amount of energy consumed in terms of servers is a massive net benefit in terms of how we can run the business. As I say, and in time, actually, the cloud providers are getting there in terms of the sustainability, or in terms of, you know, really net zero data centers. So yeah, absolutely part of the solution, I think. I can see Graeme nodding, so I agree.
Okay, right, moving on. The report talks about the fact that 2/3 of digital leaders are facing a skills crisis. So Rashada, how can we work with education to try and unearth the next generation of technology professionals?
And I think, you know, if you were to go back almost 10, 15, 20 years ago, you know, the role that education played in terms of looking at digital innovation was a lot different to what it looks like today. I think, as I mentioned earlier, you know, young people are certainly more accessible and have a lot more access to technology and to innovation, but they also have a lot new ideas and fresh perspectives. So how do we take that energy, how do we take that that insightfulness and put that into workable solutions? And I think, having role models, having access to them, having access to organisations like ours, and making sure they can see themselves reflected in those roles, but also what they do as well, and get an understanding of what these companies do. That's something that we strive for at Your Future Ambition, which is seeking to educate and inspire young people so they can see what they can be, but also can see a pathway to achieving those successes. And I think that's really important. But also recognising that what you study at university, school, college, or even if you're homeschooled, there's a lot of transferable skills. I read law at university, had no idea I'd be working in technology. If you were to tell me that 20 years ago, I simply would have laughed. But it's the most rewarding experience I've ever had to date. And actually, there's so much that I've learned and I've brought to the industry that through my experiences that I think if we can just get young people to see that, work with grassroots organisations in local communities. Let's just, understand where the talent is. There's so much out there, but we need to tap into it. They need to know who we are. We need to know who they are. And we need to have that binding link between education and industry. I think that's how we're going to move the needle forward. If I may, at AWS, we run the Get IT program, which is a program that seeks to inspire and inform young girls about opportunities in tech. We also have the Restart program, where you don't have to be a young person to want to work in the industry. You actually want to change careers. There's a Restart program where we encourage people who might want to change their roles or change in later life to re-qualify using cloud technology and cloud skills. We have the Restart program. So there's lots of different things out there, but I think from an education standpoint, connect with the educators, connect with the leaders, connect and show them the opportunities, connect them in terms of giving them the opportunity to speak to role models in industry, mentors. Mentoring is absolutely important, and doing that with someone who understands your strengths and can support you on your weaknesses. And also doing it in an enjoyable way. People learn and receive information in lots of different ways, but doing so in terms of being practical, having that hands-on experience and seeing what different roles are out there, I think you can't go wrong in terms of education and linking those two together.
I'll pull in an audience question. And I'll have to plead ignorance here because there's an acronym I don't actually know. Some of you might, so help me out. But any insights on how CIOs are working with CHROs to map the skills and capabilities within their organisation for better workforce planning? Or if this is more of a focus in the midst of a major multi-sector talent shortage? And that's from Alex Evans. I'm not exactly sure what's...
Chief Human Resource Officer. I'm going to put it out
there.
There
we go.
I think.
I didn't know that, but there we are.
Right.
You, obviously, with Your Future, Your Ambition, you're talking to a lot of technology leaders. Is that something that you're hearing from them?
Yeah, so it is. There's a massive skill shortage, and certainly in the UK, if we don't move that needle forward soon, we are going to be behind the curve. And I think what's really important in terms of organisations looking at those skills gaps is understanding where they're going to access that talent. Are they going to the standard places, or are they going and casting the net a lot wider? I think, as I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of people who later in life want to transition. There's a lot of talented people out there who can bring transferable skills. Graeme mentioned, some people who are put on furlough, potentially using their skills to serve another purpose. There's lots of different ways in which organisations, chief people officers, chief HR officers, business leaders and unit leaders can work collaboratively to help solve those problems. And it isn't just something that I think at a business level you can be doing. You can be doing that on an individual level as well. It's really important that, if you're having a good experience and you're learning new things, that you share that advice with other people. You share that knowledge, and that way it spreads around and people can then get more informed about current affairs and what's happening in our industry.
Can I add one?
Absolutely.
I think there's a couple of things maybe he refers to as well. Going through a transformation in companies, if you do an exercise by paperwork or by Excel, you look, this is the old job description, this is the new job description, and you just move people, and that's where disaster usually happens. And I think when you transform, and this is as well a way to kind of move more diversity into technology. I think technology has really changed and move it into a digital era as well. People are worried they need to go and do coding, and that's not what they want to do, and push a lot of women away. And in the new digital world, there's so much more than coding. There's a lot more technology, low code, no code. And the roles that really are needed is product owner, people that really understand the customer needs and the bigger picture. And that's a big space for talented women and people that really want to change. So I agree with you. We shouldn't really stick to, oh, you're a project manager, so you can become a Scrum Master. It's not about that. It's what is the individual, what the aspiration, what they can do, and then move it to that. But I do think there's much more roles available that people can get into, and I think that's a way to really push for diversity.
Sorry, absolutely.
Can I just add as well, just as an extension of that, I think that's a really good point. I think in enterprise organizations who are on that digital transformation journey or on that agile journey, right, sometimes there's a lot of misconceptions from people within the organization about what that transformation is going to look like. Is my job going to be secure? Will I have to completely stop what I'm doing? Are they going to force me down a route that I don't want to go in? And I think actually when the business and the tech side work together, when people have a seat at the table, I think it makes so much difference in terms of a smooth transition where everyone is on board, everyone has a perspective to share and also be heard. I think that's what's going to make it a lot easier for organisations to see those skills gaps and also provide the opportunity for moving forward. So.
Marcus, I feel like we're on your home territory here. The question that I had, and listening to Barbara talking, I mean, was how do you truly empower people to change an organisation? But I imagine there's a number of points there that you'd probably pick up upon.
Absolutely, yes. I think I want to go back to the skills question first of all. So one of the things that I think many organizations are overlooking is that they often have in their frontline, particularly if they're a retail organization or a bank, incredibly talented people that you can mobilize to become part of your technology function. So I can tell you that when I was at Apple, a surprising number of Apple's engineering talent actually come from the front line. They worked as geniuses in bars, they worked in the retail stores. And I think sometimes organizations overlook the potential that they have within their own walls. And so that's one of the things that here at T-Mobile we're super focused on. I think in terms of empowering people to drive change, and one of the things that I found really important in my career is to make sure you create an environment of safety for them. One of the big differences that I've seen between working in Silicon Valley and the West Coast of the United States and having grown up in the UK is that in the UK, it's fair to say that failure is just not acceptable. You would never have gone into the boardroom of Marks and Spencer and presented a project or a program that had failed to deliver something. Whereas if you're on the West Coast of the United States, there is a much greater acceptance that not everything that you work on can actually be successful and that you can learn from those insights and you can really help to create a stronger strategy by acknowledging that failure. And I think that's one of the key things. If we really want to drive change within our organizations, we have to create an environment where our people can feel safe to share their knowledge and their insights, even when they don't go quite according to plan. And one of the things that I'm really passionate about, David, and we've talked about this before, is experimentation. And I do think that many well-established organizations don't do enough experimentation. They're still very focused on the idea that you have to define the perfect program or project and then you execute to it. Whereas in reality, being agile also means that you have to be much more focused on experimentation. And you have to accept that the skills that you're going to use to deliver value to your customers could come from anywhere. They could come from your frontline. They could come from people working in finance or HR. They don't have to necessarily be people working traditionally in technology. And so absolutely important that we consider that as well.
I'll stick with you just for a second because we've got a question from LinkedIn Live, Jeremy Bullock. You've mentioned their experimentation, but Jeremy asks, in terms of digital transformation, what is it that companies are not doing that you would want or expect them to be doing? Is there anything that you'd add to experimentation?
Yeah, there's a couple of things. I mean, I have done a lot of thinking about this, so I think there are actually 6 things, and I'll just touch on them briefly in the interest of time. You've got to have a flexible technology stack. And many organizations are really encumbered by the legacy technology that they have. And I think that if you're going to drive digital transformation, you can't ignore the technology. We've talked about experimentation, but you can't experiment unless you are measuring the right things. And many organizations are really focused on what I describe as vanity metrics. They're not really thinking about the levers that they can pull in order to drive their business forward. So that's really important. Then there's this concept of extreme collaboration, in that to be digital, you really have to break down organizational boundaries. And to the point that was made earlier, you can't just have people within technology thinking that their role is to deliver the technology. That is now democratized across the organization. You've got to collaborate beyond your traditional boundaries. We've touched upon agility, of course, and that's critical to all of this. But the thing that I think is most important is customer focus. And going back to something I said earlier, as technologists, historically, we haven't spent enough time talking about customers. And my belief is that to have a successful digital transformation, your North Star has to be delivering value for your customers, solving problems for them, deepening their relationship with you. If you do that and you have the other things that we've talked about, I believe that you can be successful in digital transformation.
Yeah.
So we talked a little bit about digital transformation. We kind of have erred off that skills question that we originally were on. I'm going to pull it back to skills for just a moment. And Hannah, I just wanted to ask you this. I actually met a student at Web Summit who was studying linguistics at Oxford University. She got herself a ticket for Web Summit because she wanted to find out what she could learn whilst she was out there. And yet she didn't feel that she had the skill set that technology organizations would be interested in, which I'll be honest, kind of astounded me, especially in an industry where we have this horrible skills crisis and we're trying to pull talent from lots of different parts of society. Why aren't we reaching these people?
Totally, and I think, you know, it's quite baffling that she's clearly a very kind of proactive person, very smart, you know, educating herself in other areas of technology. So I think, you know, it's a separate issue, and we've kind of touched on it a little bit around the pressure that we're putting on young people and how we can support them better into realising their potential. And I think a part of it, kind of going back to your point, was around mentorship, opening their eyes, them seeing other people that they can kind of relate to in the workforce, I think is really important. Enabling them to kind of shrug off this imposter syndrome and, you know, develop themselves and see that they can kind of reach those heights that they want to get to. I think there's also this, you know, I keep coming back to kind of the culture aspect of this, and I think, you know, we touched upon elements of culture throughout this panel, but I think culture is so important to attracting talent and retaining people as well, what your culture is and what that says about you as an organisation. And your mission, you know, attracting talent, they will come to you for a great mission and feeling like they're contributing to that mission as well is so important today. You know, younger people today want to connect to your company mission and feel like they're contributing to something great. So I think if we can reach these people via these, you know, channels through kind of empowering them, through mentorship, through personal development, and we can reach them naturally through the mission. You know, we have people applying to various different roles at my startup Tinto that, you know, some of them are just saying, I'll take any role you've got going because I love the mission, you know, and that is really powerful.
And that's the difference, I think, that in organization we go by specific job description and we're really fixated on title and job descriptions. And unfortunately, if you talk about agility and I think what you were saying about what the customer wants, you've got to hire someone that's got the vision, is flexible, and today can do something and tomorrow is prepared to do something else. Yeah. So I think we need to change as well to be able to attract this kind of people that could be this, you know, do whatever we need to do and stay with us instead of saying, hold on, we hire you for this, you no longer fit.
Yeah. We've got about 2 minutes left, so this is going to be short, I'm afraid, but we do touch upon the future of the digital leader in the report. One question that we've got, and I'm going to come to you, Rashada, for this, and then we'll wrap up, so no pressure. Vivian Hokins, if the panel were recruiting their successor, what would they see as the key skills for the future CIO? I appreciate you are not a CIO, but with your future, your ambition, you are talking to young people all the time. What skills do you think they need?
And many of them are CIOs, by the way, of their own companies. The skills they need to be they need to be forward-thinking, they need to be innovative, they need to think outside of the box. In fact, there's no box to be had there. They need to see and explore the different perspectives that everyone has, to encourage people to share that. They need to be able to fail fast and fail forward. They need to have two hands, one to help themselves and one to help the next person behind them for their succession. And they need to make sure there's seats at the table that's representative of the customers they want to serve. 1 second. That was it.
Perfect.
Amazing.
We are out of time, so forgive me. I might read off my phone a couple of times because there are some housekeeping messages that if I forget, I will be lynched for. No, but thank you to the panel. Thank you for the three of you from dialing in from remote locations and the three of you for joining us in the studio today. And thank you for watching if you're attending this event, obviously online. If you've registered for the event, you will receive a full copy of the report in your mailbox shortly. If you would like to download the whole full report, please visit our landing page, harveynashgroup.com/DLR, or jump to the website where you can find out more about the service offerings of the Harvey Nash Group as a whole and rewatch this event if you've joined halfway through. And finally, when this call ends, there will be a very short survey. We would love it if you could take just a couple of minutes to complete that so we can try and make these events better in the future. But thank you for joining us.